So the 2023 governance report defines 5 areas of global stewardship: performance, risk management, people, planet, and board operations. Our focus today is going to be on people, with the recognition that people impact all of the other areas in the report. So Melinda, let's start with you. When you think about human capital management or human capital oversight, it can mean a lot of things to different people. From your perspective, what does it mean and how is that evolving?
Thanks, Sherry. Listen, when I think about human capital management, much of the topics that were on that list that we just went through in the survey really incorporate a lot of pieces of human capital management. But really, if you take a step back, it's really about investing in people assets, right? Because we spend a lot of time in board meetings talking about physical assets and the financial investment necessary, which is, of course, pretty important. But we don't spend as much time on focusing on the people assets and some of that. So I would also argue that, or say that, beyond those traditional functions, so beyond the total rewards, talent management, talent acquisition, culture, etc., it also should include business strategy and the impact that people have on business strategy, and how that's kind of integrated together. So when I think about board oversight and differentiators, I'd say it's boards who inquire, ask, understand, and integrate the people metrics and strategy into the business discussion, right? Certainly you need to focus on the economics of the business, and should. Without the individuals to run the business, those economics can be at risk, right? Certainly some of those discussions are at the comp committee, but bringing those discussion on readiness of the organization, so that survey that talked about we have a ready workforce for the future, that was a pretty decent percentage that was agree, and maybe even a fairly decent percentage that was somewhat agree. I would argue those are the kind of conversations that ought to happen in the future, right? At the board, sorry, because that's where your potential risk is in your organization. Can you meet that long-term 3 to 5 year plan? And what is it that's getting in the way? I would also say that when you think about human capital management in today's world, there's so many moving pieces beyond the practical pieces that the board has to worry about, like what goes in your 8K, what goes in your 10K, what goes in your proxy, what goes in your sustainability report, because all of that has an impact on human capital management.
Thank you so much. Well, Theo, let's go to you. And I think it ties quite well with what Melinda said. The 2023 Governance Outlook Report noted a close correlation between HCM and long-term performance, such as productivity and supply chain impact, replacement cost impact, reputation impact, and more. When you think about the workforce of the future and the challenges, some of which we just read off, what do you see as the board's role?
Yeah, I think I would almost flip the question a little bit and say, which are the areas of the business that aren't impacted by human capital management? And the answer, from my point of view, is none. I think every single part of the organization is impacted by human capital management. As far back as over 100 years ago, Henry Ford said, the most important things in an organization aren't on the balance sheet. They're its reputation and its people. And as I think Melinda mentioned, having a framework from a board standpoint to talk about your 3 and 5 year plans from a strategy standpoint is terrific, because you're memorializing all your hopes, dreams, and aspirations for the company. Sitting underneath those aspirations are your financial plans. How are we going to do? How are we going to overperform? How are we going to mitigate against underperformance? And then sitting under that, I think the most important enabler of business capability is managing your human resources ecosystem and making sure that your people are engaged, making sure that your people are focused on those accountabilities in the business, that the strategy cascades down through the business. So I believe that human capital management is a part of each and every part of it. And even though we talk about in our survey, what are the things that are the greatest priorities? I believe it's yes, yes, and yes. All of those things are. The role of directors is not a simple one. We can't pick and choose between one or the other. So I think human capital management really goes through each and every one of these and will impact the future. One of the data points in the 2023 governance report says that 93% of companies are more likely to report financial success over their peers if they have differentiated talent management systems. That's an enormous number. So bringing this up as we are now at the board level over the past 2 or 3 years in particular as a topic is as old as 100 years ago with Henry Ford and as current as today. So I think it rolls through everything. The question about the workforce of the future and how do we think of that is complicated, but I think the thing that we can expect is we're going to have a more engaged workforce. We're going to have a workforce that's much more challenging of the things that we want to do, whether it's on hybrid work, whether it's on the things that we see at United Auto Workers, at UPS, or at the Screen Actors Guild in Hollywood. Workers are standing up and shouting out in a way that they've never done before. And that's not going to stop. And I think they have more tools today to be able to challenge organizations than they ever had before. One of the things that one of the reports from last year that I think is really compelling, and if the people on the session haven't read it, I would highly recommend that you read it. It's called the American Opportunity Index. It is a study that was done that looks at the case histories of 3 million workers, and it looks at 250 of the largest public companies. And rather than slice the data as which are the best companies to work for, they look at which are the best companies to work for individuals who don't have a high school degree, which are the best companies to work for if you're looking for stability, which are the best companies to work for if you want to join a company and leave and it's a launching pad for a better job later on, which are the best companies to work for to get promoted. That kind of information is out in the public domain. So employees and workers are coming to us with much better information than they've ever had before, so that the employer and employee of the future has to understand that people are going to be equipped in ways that they've never been equipped before, and that all this information is out there in the public forum.
It's extremely interesting. And Theo, though, given your roles, I mean, you've played a lot of roles. You've been a CHRO, several companies. You've been on the boards of several companies. What do you see as some of the most effective board practices for human capital oversight?
Yeah, as I said, I think it starts with setting up the strategy. And typically in our organizations, we do that with a 3 or 5 year view. And when you set up that strategy, I think it's really important to spend as much time and as much rigor as you spend on the financials with the conversation about human capital management. One of the interesting things about setting up a strategy is we have this ambitious plan that says we're going to grow by $1 billion over the next 5 years. What we don't do is then say, if I look at the human capital in my business, are they prepared to handle a complicated business that's going to be $5 billion bigger? If your business is a turnaround, is that turnaround executive going to be the same kind of executive I need in a growth mode? What are the skills and capabilities that person need? They may not be the right person, but we don't have those conversations anchored to strategy, and I think they should be. So it really starts with the strategy session and says, if we have all these great aspirations for the future, do we have the talent inside of the business to be able to meet those challenges for the future? The person who's good today may not be good in the future in this different workforce that we're planning. It starts there. And then every year we tend to look at those strategies again. We should also look at the human management processes on an annual basis. And those conversations are full board conversations, not just tucked away with the compensation committee or the compensation and organizational development committee.
Thank you very much.